Hey all, Scott here.
I don't know what's wrong with me. I have tried everything. I tried therapy. Why don't I play a game made for a system that was marketed towards a more mature audience, rival Nintendo's Mario, and then cry myself to sleep for the next 4 nights? Nintendo was king of the video game industry back in the mid-80s to mid-90s. The Nintendo Entertainment System dominated every competitor. The Sega Master System and the Atari 7800 paled in comparison to the NES. Sega wanted to prove that not everyone was born a Nintendo diehard. The Sega Master System released in October 1985 in Japan, and Nintendo couldn't stop laughing. The NES won in nearly every category. It had better games, the better cartridge designs, the better controller, the better mascot. The hardware in the Master System was slightly better than the NES, but that's all it really had going for it. I mean, just look at the cartridges. I use the Master System's cartridges as graphing paper. I can do the same thing with NES cartridges, but the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega Genesis, however, were so much closer in sales. Sega had become a powerhouse of the console market. Sega was scaring Nintendo, and most of that was due to Sega's only good conception, blasphemy. Sega needed a new mascot that could be on par with Mario. Alex Kidd wasn't going to cut it. Several designs were submitted to Sega. There was a dog, rabbit, Theodore Roosevelt. They settled for a blue hedgehog. Blue. Hedgehog. In all seriousness, he was the perfect mascot to combat Mario. I never really got into Sonic much. I played Sonic the Hedgehog on the Wii's Virtual Console. I played Sonic Forces on Switch, and that's a bitch I will never recover from. Oh, I'll get to this one eventually. I really want to take a look at where Sonic started. This is Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Genesis. Sega! Sonic the Hedgehog was released on June 23rd, 1991. And it was a critical and commercial success. By Christmas of that year, it sold over 1 million copies in the US and over 2 million copies worldwide. It brought an end to Nintendo's monopoly on video games, while also making him an iconic character. Now, the game itself doesn't seem like anything special. It's an everyday 2D platformer. The game consists of 6 zones and 1 shorter final zone. Each act is longer to accommodate for the faster pace. Green Hill Zone is the perfect first zone for a game with these 3 words in the title. It pretty much serves as an introduction to the rest of the game. The goal is to make it to the end of an act, obviously, but you aren't going to do that by just holding right. There's a bunch of obstacles and enemies to stop you in your tracks, and have 50 rings by the end of Act 1 and 2 in the first 5 zones. And you get to play through a special stage. Sonic 1's special stages are always a nausea fest for me. The stage is constantly rotating, and that makes it so much more difficult to tell where you're going. I think Green Hill Zone does a phenomenal job at showing you what the rest of the game is all about. But don't get too excited. It's all downhill from here. Marble Zone. I could go on for hours about how this zone is equivalent to hell, but I'll spare you some time and sum it up into 3 words. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? This act is just a bunch of waiting, waiting, and waiting. It is such a speed bump coming from Green Hill Zone. Not every level needs to be speedy, but Marble Zone is just so boring and long and annoying as hell. I'm not saying platforming being the priority is a bad thing. It's just the difference is so drastic compared to how the game started off. I could never get past this zone when I was younger. Yeah, not even 5-year-old Logan could do it, and that's given me even more of a reason. I always went back to something like New Super Mario Bros. Wii after eventually dying. If you take a look at sprite maps of the first acts of Green Hill Zone and Marble Zone, it's easy to see where the differences begin. Green Hill Zone's open nature just isn't present in Marble Zone. Exploration isn't encouraged as much as it is in Green Hill Zone. In Green Hill Zone, if you fall from the top path down to the bottom path, you lost the privilege of finding whatever may be hiding up there. Act 3 is the only act where you have the choice to take another path, but it connects with the main path faster than Sonic himself. There are some secret pathways hidden behind these walls, but all you get is an extra life and some rings. Spring Yard Zone is a nice reminder of just how poorly most zones are designed. It has a Green Hill Zone kind of feel to it. You have the option to take different paths, and there's some pretty well hidden secrets, though this zone falls pretty short with questionable enemy placement. Most enemies here are kind of in a spot where You can't really run. There's one enemy here that will randomly appear, and it's only vulnerable when it's not moving. It doesn't help that there are some springs that will block the path and bounce you back if you aren't paying attention. You can imagine how annoying it would be to bump into one of these springs and bounce right back into this enemy, but in my opinion, nothing I've mentioned so far can even compare to Labyrinth Zone. This is where Sonic 1 peaks in questionable level design. Most of the zone is underwater, which is fine, it's still Sonic the Hedgehog, but everything happens at a much slower pace. This zone is kind of a callback to Marble Zone with this more linear path and very few deviations. You need to find air bubbles to stay alive. Now this goes for every platformer I've played. I don't like underwater levels. They're just so long and frustrating. Like in Act 2, there's this track with these platforms you're supposed to jump on. You're supposed to make your way to this button, but there's spikes at the top. Second time with the same thing. There are no spikes. Wouldn't it make more sense to introduce something first and then up the difficulty later on? Starlight Zone is probably my favorite zone here besides Green Hill. It is much easier than Marble, Spring Yard, and Labyrinth. There's some loose for speed here, and there's some invisible bomb enemies that are total pace breakers. I'd argue this zone might be on par with Marble with its iffy level design. There are some bottomless pits here that are in places where you can easily speed into them. It's not bad, but I'd still rather play through Green Hill. Scrap Rain is more or less the same thing. It expands, which is nice, but it also vomits a lot of the other junk from the other zones here, which is kind of annoying. You can't enter any special stages anymore, so no more continues. If you die here, you need to restart the entire game, unless you just use that one cheat code to select a specific stage. As previously mentioned, you can only enter a special stage in Act 1 or 2 of the first 5 zones by carrying at least 50 rings to the end of an act. So 10 chances to nab one of the 6 Chaos Emeralds, or get a continue. Well, that's Sonic the Hedgehog. I am not itching to play through this one again. There are so many flaws that pretty much kept me from moving forward. I had to use that cheat code I mentioned earlier. I feel like playing re-releases of this game now would be a much better experience, like the mobile port by Christian Whitehead. That's a masterpiece. It fixes so many of the problems I have with this game. I don't think I could ever go back to the original. I absolutely love this game. It's one of my favorite video games of all time. I grew up playing through Green Hill Zone, and stopping there. It's far from a bad game, it's just that its flaws become more apparent as I played through it. I can't wait to see what the other games have in store for me. Damn it!